Thank you so much for coming, everyone. Is this anybody's first time at Word Up? Awesome. We have some first timers, which is cool because I learned today a lot about Word Up history because we have two presenters here that are very tied to our beginnings. We started as a pop-up shop in 2011. It was supposed to be a very temporary thing, but the community wanted Word Up around. The pop-up was extended for like a year. Andrew, Laties here, actually had one of our very first events at Word Up back in 2011 when we were a pop-up. So this is a full circle moment to be back.
This book.
Yeah, for that book right there. And yeah, because of all the community support, crowdfunding support, we were able to eventually land here where we've been since 2013. Doing events almost every single day. We are a volunteer run mostly by local residents. And so we appreciate you being here tonight and welcome you to, shop around for any books and even contribute a donation at the front counter when you check out. But yeah, I'll pass it along over to our author, Andrew Laties, and our presenter, Sandy Jimenez, who helped found Word Up directly. Veronica's so sad, our founder, who's not here, to be missing this today. It's going to be a really cool talk.
She's in Atlanta helping other people do exactly what they're doing.
Exactly. Being a boss. I don't know if you want to add any anecdote to the intro spiel since you were here for the beginning of it all, but
I have a little statement.
Yeah, go ahead. All right.
So, hey everyone, I'm going to read from this just so I have something to say. Thanks for coming. Welcome to Word Up Books, a volunteer-built, volunteer-fueled, and community-devoted bookshop. Begun by Veronica Liu way back in 2011 as a pop-up on 175th Street. I literally would not be here, and these walls filled with all the world's love, culture, wisdom, and intellect would not be hugging it and clasping you right now if it weren't for Veronica's vision and indomitable persistence. If you're wondering what can be done in these ridiculous times, these absurd times with so much criminality issuing forth from the very government we pay for with our tax dollars, if you're wondering what you can do when the very government that is charged with serving and protecting us has been hijacked by corrupt liars, greedy opportunists, be kind here, doing anything they can to turn every one of us against each other, just know that you're already doing it by doing. This is your bookstore. Come back, get involved, bring a kid, bring your parents, bring a date. John Waters said if you show up at someone's house and they don't have any books on the shelves, don't sleep with them. Come here, buy a book for a friend, buy a book for yourself. Turn out your pockets and donate. I swear this is a better use of your money than Starbucks. Among the many things this bookshop has done, it served as an early COVID testing center at the very beginning of our great troubles. Word Up created and maintained a public fridge and pantry for the neighborhood. It has hosted pro bono legal advice sessions for immigrants, and it has been a home and a place of meeting for people to create and perform art in support of their neighbors and for a better society for 14 years as of this July. Nobody can stop this place and its family of culture and volunteers, but it sure could use you right now and always. Get involved. Come back. It's open on Wednesdays. So I'm Sandy Jimenez. I'm a comic book artist, writer, and educator. My work explores themes of identity, urban life, politics, and society. I recently completed my Master of Arts degree at New York's Graduate Center in biography and memoir, and I teach at City Tech and the FCC. I'm here, and you're here today to talk with Andy Laties, an author, musician, a veteran bookseller whose career has been defined by a passionate commitment to literature, free expression, and community empowerment. Known for his award-winning book, Rebel Bookseller, Laties has spent decades at the front lines of independent bookselling, turning bookshops into spaces of resistance, refuge, and love. Like his innovative bookshop in Easton, Pennsylvania, the Book and Puppet Company, launched with his partner, the artist Rebecca McDonald. Mr. Laties' latest book, you're telling me my kids can't read this book? You're telling my kids they can't read this book. Excuse me. I feel like I should say that like Jerry Stiller. You're telling my kids they can't read this book? Confronts the escalating crisis of book banning in America. His book examines how censorship threatens democracy, undermines the mission of our republic, and silences marginalized voices in America and around the world. With both historical insight and first-hand experience, Mr. Laties explores the power of books to challenge authority, and ignite social change. Tonight, he joins us to share his urgent message about why the freedom to read must be fiercely defended, now more than ever. Please welcome Andy Laties.
Thank you so much, Sandy. Thank you for all the work that you've done putting this word up together and keeping it going all these years. Incredible. 14 years.
Well, that's all Veronica Lou, Emmanuel Abreu, many people that check our website. You'll see many of the names.
Dozens of people.
Yeah.
But you were there before.
I was. Thanks to you, because you introduced me to Veronica, and she had this crazy idea. There's this old sort of trope of, the lunatics taking over the asylum. In Word Up's case, it was like there was this brilliant lunatic named Veronica Lou who walked up to a corner and said, there should be an asylum. So she started a bookstore. She got joined by all these other lunatics, like me, and it got going, and here we are, in 2 locations, and, doing the great work that really needs to be done in communities, especially in our lives.
It's a marvelous model for how a community can create a space like this for itself.
So tell your friends and come back. Open on weekends. So I'll start with a few questions for you. And I've grouped these, there's general questions. There's a sort of few questions about policy, politics, power, bookselling and activism. We'll get through, most of it, and then sort of turn to a Q&A to you guys. Ask the man himself about why he wrote this book, why it's important. So, Andy, what was your very first personal memory or encounter with the book? What was your first awareness?
So, Sandy shared these questions with me ahead of time. And so I have thought about the answers. And in some cases, I've brought props. And I did bring props to answer this question. When I was in 5th grade, I checked this book out of the library, Black Boy by Richard Wright. And subsequently, I checked this book out of the library. Also, I was 10 years old, the autobiography of Malcolm X. And it was very difficult for me to read these books when I was 10. I didn't understand a lot of what was in them. But I had grown my hair long. This was 1969, because I was opposed to the Vietnam War, and that's what I saw people doing who opposed the Vietnam War. And so the kids were bullying me and calling me a faggot and a homo and a commie. And I was, 4'2",
Big for me.
and I had hair down to my shoulders. And these books are about kids who are bullied and, much worse than me. Their parents were killed and, things, really, really bad things happened to them. And these books are so direct and so honest and true. And I really loved reading them, even though I did not understand some of what was in them. But my 5th grade teacher was baffled that I was carrying this book in particular. It took me 6 months to read this book, and I carried it around for 6 months. And she asked me repeatedly, why are you reading that book? Why do you have that book? She did not take it away from me, but she did challenge me about just having it at all. And I finished it in 5th grade, and I still think about passages that confused me. And gradually, over my lifetime, I have come to understand more of what it was I didn't understand and what I did understand about the autobiography of Malcolm X. And of course, we are a few blocks away from where he was killed right now, which is, yeah. And so this is a book that I was challenged on by my teacher, but she did not stop me from reading it. And the librarian at Penfield Town Hall, which was not the school library that had this book, it was the town library, did not prevent me from checking it out. So this was a very important book to me, which I read when I was 10. And I like to tell people, a child can read any book, and they will get from it whatever they're capable of getting, and then they can read it again later. They can read it as an adult. And a good book can be read over and over throughout your life. But there is no reason to keep children from reading any book out of fear that it'll harm them. Black Boy was on. I looked this up on Wikipedia recently. It was the 82nd most banned book in America between 2000 and 2009. So I don't think that Autobiography of Malcolm X was banned because I don't think that it was even in any school library. But Black Boy was in school libraries, and it was very widely banned. And I think that kids can read any book. So that was my first experience with book banning.
My first experience, Mad Magazine used to do these little collected anthologies and like novelized form. And me and my friend Leroy got caught with them. And the teacher was so angry because they were actually in the library. And then the next week they were out. So that's kind of my experience. Far less dignified than the masterworks you just showed.
Well, Mad Magazine was a remarkable literary
The collection I had
effort.
had a spoof. I want to say it was Jack Davis drawing it, but it was called East Block Story. And it was Kennedy and Khrushchev. It was a
Wow.
It was a spoof of West Side Story. But it's like the commies and the capitalists like, skipping and dancing and ridiculous.
It was
Brilliant.
sophisticated stuff, and it was, over the heads of 11-year-olds, but that's okay.
I just knew it made adults incredibly angry. It made us laugh. So it was the right 1-2 punch.
And why do adults try to prevent kids from having access to that kind of stuff? That's amazing. It's the adults that's baffling.
To be fair, I think Bill Gates was trying to put some. All right. So, how would you define book banning as it exists today? Because I know we think about it. You certainly in your book go over like book burnings and sort of these like, sort of ground level activity that happens, in communities that are very reactionary. But how would you say book banning is? How would you define it in the context of today's political climate?
Well, first of all, the index that the Catholic Church published for hundreds of years, the Index Librorum Prohibitorum, the Spanish Inquisition had a list. And of course they were banning books for adults. You wouldn't have even thought about banning books for children. They were banning, Erasmus and Martin Luther. I talk about Candide in here. They were banning books that were thought to be a threat to the church. That kind of book banning is really not what we're dealing with here. It's quite fascinating that in this nation there's this amazing level of animation around children, banning books for children. Why are you so worried? Do you think children are going to rise up and overthrow the American economy, the 8-year-olds and then the 10-year-olds? What are you scared of? And but it is true. Oh, maybe. No, we can hope. We can hope. But it is true that in this country, right now, when people talk about book banning, it's a striking thing that they're usually talking about children's books.
They kind of give it up.
They have given up on the adults, and that's
They think they can still control kids.
You've got the internet. You've got, the adults can get any book they want. They can read anything they want so easily. Books are so readily available. It is absolutely pointless trying to ban books for adults. So, admittedly, you might be able to prevent a 5-year-old. So let's go after the 5-year-old, because maybe we'll be able to do it. It's just baffling. But it is true that in this country, right now, book banning is all about kids.
So, what would you say, are among the motivations outside of the fact that it is easier to go after an entire sort of swath of go after? What's sort of driving? Because you've been at this a long time. You've seen several decades,
Yes.
really since the Reagan era onward, the successive sort of conservative uprisings,
Right.
the populist movements. shows up in our in our election cycles. But for you as a bookseller, someone who buys books to sell to the public, what do you think is motivating these bands?
Well, first of all, I opened my first children's bookstore in 1985. So that's 40 years that I've been a children's bookseller, running children's bookstores. And before that, I was born in '59. So I was a child in the United States in the 60s and 70s and 80s. And I looking back, especially after I became a children's bookseller, I became much more aware of the kinds of books that were being produced for children in this country. And so my book talks a good deal about the history of children's books in the 20th century and what changed. And so I think that, tell me the question again.
It's, what do you think is motivating?
What's motivating?
Outside of the actual ease, right? Because if they could ban everything, they could.
I think that they're actually interested in scoring political points for the agenda of gaining power in the country. They're trying to
gin up symbolism too.
They're ginning up moral panic in a constituency because they want to win elections, and they're trying to act in a divisive manner, get people into their corners, and help to generate voter turnout. I do not believe that the people who are attempting to ban books are actually concerned about children. I don't believe that. I think that they're concerned about their agenda in the political system. I think it's hypocritical, to say the least.
How do you respond to people who say banning books protects children? Right? Because that's always their sort of their argument. Right? It's like there's a great book made by colleagues of ours called Bad for You about the history of sort of panics around children, like Dungeons and Dragons, satanic panics in the 80s. Scott Cunningham, Kevin Pyle, did this great book Bad for You. What do you say? Because that's always such a great defense for what they do.
Yeah, it's going to harm the children. It's striking that,
especially when it's a community.
I think that everyone agrees with the idea that education is a positive thing for children. Children should, receive education, and then they will join as adults in helping to run the society. And I don't understand how people who believe children should be encouraged to step forward and join adult society, how they can believe that children will be harmed through exposure to the world as it is. Children benefit from encountering reality, truth especially, but certainly in books you have this safety. You don't have to. I did not have to go to the places that Malcolm and Richard Wright went to. I didn't have to have those experiences. I could read their book. It was much safer for me to do that. And I learned a lot. And I learned so much from books about worlds that I have never directly experienced. And that has informed my ability to function in the world. And I read a lot. I've always enjoyed reading a lot, and I would like children, any child, to have access to the full breadth of the written word that our civilization and other civilizations have produced. Why would you think that that's a bad thing for a child? Children can encounter works. They can encounter unpleasant works. They can encounter obnoxious and abhorrent work. And they can say, this is what I think about this. I disagree with this book. I don't like this author. I've read two authors who disagree with each other. I wonder what the points are that they each have to say. Critical thinking is a key desired outcome of children coming of age in society. And to have access to the literature of the world, to have access to books, unmolested by adults. There's no teacher. There's no parent. It's just me And this book, even the author is absent. I am here with this text. I get to interact with it the way I want to, and I can go back to it in 2 years. I can go back to it in 10 years. It will be the same book. It is a stable text. I will have changed, and I can look at it from a different perspective. That's why children should have access to as many books as possible.
Well, to your point, empowering critical thinking is something that is dangerous to certain political powers that work in our nation, right?
I just don't know whether you can really stop it, though. I mean, people really do develop. That's why I'm optimistic.
You can only slow it. So, what role should authors and publishers play in advocating against censorship? You've been a bookseller, so how could they help you, or help booksellers, or help a place like Word Up, or help the various community bookshops around the nation do the great work of filling in the edges around the experience of education, exposing people to the world, and getting that critical thinking going? What do you recommend, or what can they do in advocating against censorship?
Well, I think that authors often find themselves confronted by criticism, and it's tough, especially nowadays. Where people you can be anonymously attacked on the internet, and it's painful and scary. And so, what I think is that authors and publishers need to be proactive, because if they're not proactive, then they'll be in this position of simply being under some defense. They'll be attacked, and it's better to be engaged and to develop your language, to have the ideas of what you want to communicate on these topics, and to get out there in front of it. And I think that many authors have done this by banding together. There are now there's Authors Against Banned Books, for instance, I think, which sort of facilitates this kind of collaborative engagement. So there are organizations. Obviously, you can join organizations, become part of PEN, but I think more important is that you, as an individual, decide to construct some aspect of your public presence where you make the statement that you support the freedom to read. So
yeah, I think it's interesting because that should be inherent to the marketing of any book, right? You don't let random people tell people what their product is, you tell them what the product is. And in these book bans, a lot of the effective strategies is always they label a book as being inherently about sexuality or something like that, whereas it's actually a book about family and things like that. So,
well, I tell you something about authors. I have met a large number of authors, and I can tell you that many authors are not comfortable as public figures.
that's why they write.
They don't really want to go out there and do, and it used to be, again, before the internet, it used to be that authors could generally keep a very low profile if they wanted to. You could be, J.D. Salinger. You could be a recluse, a famously reclusive person, and nobody could get near you. It's pretty tough right now to be famously reclusive or reclusive at all.
Yeah, there is something that is being demanded of authors and publishers now that is.
It's very irritating as an author. Authors hate it, to have to go out and be a public figure. That's not what they wanted when they to write a book.
So looking at the other side of it, communities, how can they organize effectively to resist book bans?
Well, again, community activism is a proactive thing, and
So
communities
not playing defense.
exactly.
Not waiting
Communities that wait for someone to attack them, to be targeted, will find themselves in a much worse position than communities that step forward. Now, if you look at Washington Heights, before this amazing community literary action happened, which is embodied in this space, Word Up, there was not a bookstore like this, and there was not a sort of literary hub in this area. And I think that the the existence of Word Up is good evidence that in neighborhoods that were not assessed by the experts as being a place where you're going to have literary potential and activism, that you can, that is proof that there's the possibility for more communities to develop literary activity. When we opened our bookstore, Book and Puppet Company in Easton, Pennsylvania, there had not been a new trade bookstore in Easton for 20 years. The last one that there was there had closed in the early 90s. So I think that it's possible to have individuals join together and together create a positive presence for literary action in any community. And it's there. People are writing. At this moment, so many people are writing. They're writing Facebook posts or Twitter. They're writing blog posts. They're writing poetry in journals. Self-publishing, demonstrates the rise of so much self-publishing. Demonstrates people are really writing, and so I think that when people kind of come forward and say, "Does anybody around here want to?" Well, I'm an advocate of book festivals. Have some public programming where all of us, not some author who's been published by Random House, but us, present jointly.
So places where we can meet and congregate, or
Places and programming, open mics at a local coffee shop or bar. All of those things are ways to get that sort of energy. Made those to bring the voices out, get the voices.
It may be the way forward insofar as writing and reading of solitary acts, for the most part.
Yes.
So that may be part of the sort of. So when a mob comes and says this activity is going, it's very hard to fight that.
That's why you're vulnerable when you're by yourself in your own room.
Yeah. So have you seen organizations like Pen America or the ABA support resistance to book bans?
Okay, so the American Booksellers Association, the American Library Association, PEN, the answer is that they're all active in fighting book bans. And then the way that they're active, the way the national organizations are active, is they try to provide resources for individuals and organizations around the country to draw on, templates and lists of things that you can do and resources. And in order for those methodologies to be effective, you still need the individuals at the grassroots to come up, to step forward and then utilize them.
That leads directly into another question I have for you, which is independent bookstores, like the outfits that you've run over the years, the Word Up itself. What specific roles do they play in resisting book bans other than creating these places of congregation?
Well, independent bookstores, because they are not operated by institutions that are beholden to larger groups of stakeholders and government or major nonprofit oversight, unlike, say, a university bookstore or even a chain bookstore or museum bookstore. Independent bookstores have the freedom as small commercial entities to take risks, to go ahead and do something that might cause a larger entity to feel like it would damage their brand. And
so that independence gives them a kind of freedom.
The example that comes to mind is that back in the late 80s, the Ayatollah Khomeini pronounced a fatwa against Salman Rushdie and said that anybody that sold the satanic verses, like a bookstore, should be destroyed. And there were independent bookstores around the country that responded by putting the satanic verses in their front windows. And Crocs and Brentanos in Chicago, and Cody's bookstore in San Francisco were both bombed. The president of the American Booksellers Association was invited onto national TV. Ed Morrow went to the McNeil-Lehrer NewsHour. Walden Books, which was a chain of 1,000 bookstores, had withdrawn Satanic Verses from sale. And Ed was asked, what do you say about independent bookstores and Walden Books? And he said, well, Walden Books, they have insurance issues they have to worry about. But independent bookstores, we're an independent lot. And what he meant was that, we don't like to be told what to do. We don't like to be bullied. And, the Ayatollah Khomeini is not allowed to tell me in my bookstore in Vermont or in San Francisco whether or not I can sell Satanic Verses. I'll put Satanic Verses in the window and, come and get me. And that's something that an independent bookstore can do, and then takes a risk and might get, hurt. And try. You hope you won't, or you hope if you do that the community will rally around you, or that your insurance will cover it, or it's a risk.
So here's a tricky question: have you ever had to make a difficult decision about whether or not to carry the book?
Quite a number of times I've had to decide about specific books. And I will tell you that a couple of years ago, during the first Trump administration in Easton, I had quite a few anti-Trump books. And a woman came in and asked me, where's your pro-Trump books? Where's The Art of the Deal? And, I said, I own this bookstore. I get to decide. This isn't the public
Also,
library.
You're not banning Art of the Deal. You're just not buying.
You can. The other day, I
think a ban is a very specific thing, which is closing.
Well,
right?
six months ago, I was setting up a book table outside on the shop, and a guy walked past and said, "You got Mein Kampf?" And I said, "No, I can special order it for you, but you just read it online. Read it on the internet. As a bookstore, I don't have to do it." Now, in answer to your question, in my book, I spend a chapter talking about Little Black Sambo, and which for me is a very important topic in the world of children's books in particular, because it has become a symbol of left-wing book banning. And generally speaking, when when I complain about book banning, it's possible that a right-winger will say, you're a book banner too, because you ban Little Black Sambo. They can take it for granted that I am not selling Little Black Sambo. And in my first bookstore in 1985, I carried Little Black Sambo, and the reason I carried it was that I thought I should be even-handed. And this is a controversial book. It's published in 1900. It's of historical interest, and I should have a couple copies in my store, if only to show that I am completely even-handed. And in the book, I tell the story of sort of how I interacted with a series of customers around Little Black Sambo, and I learned a lot from what happened to me running a bookstore and meeting the people that were so happy, so excited to see that I had it, and meeting a customer who was so angry and so distressed to see that I had it. It was very interesting to have both of those experiences, and each of them, of course, was operating out of their life story and then projecting onto me whatever they needed to project. But that really taught me that I could make the decision myself in my own bookstore, because you can't carry every book. Nowadays, of course, just as I said with Mein Kampf, I can say to anybody, you can buy it. You don't need me to carry every book. Little Black Black Sambo is available in 50 different editions, used, print on demand. You can read it on Gutenberg for free. So you don't need me to carry it.
There's a discrete difference between, or I would say even an explicit difference between mobilizing against publishers and forbidding the availability of a book anywhere, which is what a book ban is, right? When they go after random house. What happened with the Satanic Verses is actually probably, in terms of our cultural memory, one of the biggest ones we kind of all remember, and the violence that was associated with it. As opposed to just saying, I'm not gonna support horrible business books.
Yes, some horrible business book. Yes.
So, can you we actually just talked about this. So we talk about a specific event. We talked about the experience with that book and certain responses to it. What would you say in terms of how book bans have affected your relationship with schools and libraries in the communities you serve?
Okay, so I would like my customers to get the books that they want. As I was saying, I've been a children's bookseller for 40 years. I've run hundreds of book sales in the schools. I am very alert to what people would like to obtain, and I'm also always on the lookout for things that they don't know about, but that I am learning about and that I think that they will like. So I buy proactively. I stock my store with the awareness of my clientele and with lots of individuals who I know their tastes, and I buy for them, even though they didn't tell me they want this book. And then when they come in, I show them and I say, look at what I just found. And so I'm very much aware of who it is that I've got in my orbit, and I'm buying for them. And when it comes to schools and libraries, the most engaged I am with schools and libraries is running school book fairs, which is when a school invites the bookstore to send 50 boxes of books, and they can't tell me explicitly what to send. They can give me a list.
I always thought
the list might be
the
list might be 50 things that they want or 100 things they want, but I'm going to be bringing 1,000 things. They depend on me to know what they want, and I do, because these schools are very different from each other, and I learn about the schools. I'll talk to the volunteers who come to me. I'll talk to the librarian, and hopefully I'll come back year after year, and I'm going to see what the sales are like in the schools. So I become an expert in the curriculum of all of these different schools, whether it's a public school on the Upper West Side of Manhattan or the Muslim Education Center in Morton Grove outside of Chicago, Illinois. I know these schools. I know I've brought books into so many different kinds of schools, Waldorf schools, Solomon Schechter Day schools, the Sacred Heart, foreign language magnet schools on the north side of Chicago. So many different kinds of schools, and schools are so different from each other. Their curricula are widely varied, and the populations are so different. You've got schools in the gang zone on the west side of Chicago, and and then there's the Latin school, and I have sold in all these different kinds of schools. So I have learned what to bring. This school needs me to bring books. Nothing is more than $3. This school needs me to bring $200,000 worth of a gigantic truckload of books, because the kids are all going to be competitively spending several $100s. It's crazy. Schools are very different from each other, and if I am a good bookseller, I'll learn how to work with these different clients.
That's very very illuminating, because I always thought it was very much more the school tells you exactly what to say. They give you a list, and that's all they get.
They will make a lot less money if they do that.
Oh,
That's what I always tell the schools. If they want to hire me to bring in a book fair, I'll tell them I've been doing this for decades.
Okay. So
you gotta trust me.
Getting more on the still sort of within schools and libraries and that and all of this. how would you explain the importance of banned books to young readers or even to their parents? For those of us who haven't had these conversations within our families, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. I don't know about you, but when I hear that a book is that I'm not supposed to read a book, I want to read that book. That is the book I want to read. So that's a kind of a funny thing. And if you tell a kid your parents don't want you to read this book, I want to read even more. I will get a hold of that book. So it's kind of I don't see how you can not know this. If you are in the business of book banning, to be ignorant of the fact that you are actually drawing attention to that book. And this happens all the time. Of course, we know that when, a couple of years ago, the Art Spiegelman book Mouse was withdrawn from a school library in Tennessee. When the news went national, this is a book that had been in print for 30 years. The book's suddenly selling like crazy all over the place. It's a terrible way to get people to not read the book, to make a deal about banning it.
Yeah, related to when I was a kid, my friend Charles, who's 2 years older than me, came home one day with Marty, for those of you who know us, remember what mimeographs were. Came with this mimeograph list from the Archdiocese of New York that had a list of rock and roll bands that you could listen to.
Oh, wow.
Supposed to give us your one on sign. And the top was like the usual suspects, right? Alphabet, AC/DC, Black Sabbath, we heard of them. But the Buzzcocks. And a bunch of other bands, the Undertones, wonderful. It became a shopping list. That weekend in the Bronx, the Crazy Eddie, I'm dating myself. Crazy Eddie was this local chain of stores that sold discount records. We cleared that place out. Like that Saturday morning, every kid in the Bronx, every school district was waiting outside that store, and the owners were like, "What happened this week?" That all these like middle schoolers were here with dollars in hand. We cleared them out.
So fabulous.
I got a greatest hits, a Buzzcocks greatest hits called Operator's Man.
Wow.
And it had the absolute opposite. I would have never known about that thing.
So funny.
There was no internet back then. There was no, that's how we got some stuff we got into.
Wow.
But yeah, that's certainly silver lining, I guess.
Yeah, right. It's a promotional campaign.
So I'd like to sort of wrap up with kind of the beginning of your book, which has a wonderful passage about the great Melba Tolliver. Can you tell us a bit about that? There's a call to action there.
Well, so Melba Tolliver
intersects with journalism.
Yeah.
You could talk a bit about it.
Melba Tolliver was a very well-known journalist in the New York City area for decades on TV. She's best known as ABC Eyewitness News back in the 70s. But she continued to be an anchor person up into the 90s. And she moved out to eastern Pennsylvania in the early 2000s. And in 2019, a woman who I did not know walked into my store and said, "I'm looking for someplace to run a public community read aloud of the Mueller report. And Bethlehem Public Library won't let me do it. Barnes & Noble doesn't want to do it. And someone said that maybe you would let me do it here." And, the Mueller report, of course, is the report about Trump attempting to blackmail Zelensky to give him dirt on Biden so that then he'd get weapons. I said, "Sure. You think anyone's going to come?" She said, "Well, nobody's reading the Mueller report, and we need to change that." So I said, "Okay." And she began to run every Thursday for several hours. She was the host of a community read aloud of the Mueller report in Book and Puppet Company. And we read it over the course of the summer. And it was good reading, juicy, insane stories, these backroom meetings and so forth. And of course, a lot of it was blacked out. But it was a very interesting book. And then we finished it, and then we read it again. And we actually read it through 2.5 times. And about 20 people would come, and we'd take turns reading it. And so Melba Tolliver, was a community activist in the Easton area, and she was doing this kind of stuff. And I had heard that she was in the process of publishing a memoir, that she was writing a memoir, but it wasn't in print. And she came to me last year, so a year and a half ago, and she said, "Will you help me publish my book?" And I didn't realize that she really was having that level of trouble that she would ask me, the local bookseller, to help her. And I reached out to a number of agents and editors who I knew and who I thought would be interested in publishing the memoir of Melba Tolliver, the very well-known journalist, the first Black person to anchor a network newscast in America, 1967. She wore her natural afro at the cover of the Tricia Nixon wedding and was punished by ABC. They took her off air, and then she won in her fight against them, and so she was able to. She wore an afro all through the rest of her news career. It was an icon to an inspiration to many journalists. A lot of people came to journalism inspired by her. And she couldn't find a publisher in the year 2024. And the people I spoke to in the industry said everyone's forgotten who she is. The story that I heard about originally was that, there was a big New York Times profile of her in 1972. And because she was such a celebrity. And the quote that I use on the back of this book is, "She is a new kind of celebrity, a television superstar reporter, bred by television," this is 1972, "bred by television and its peculiar kind of intimacy which brings her into the living rooms or bedrooms or kitchens of almost 1 million viewers every night." New York Times. After that New York Times profile came out in 1972, an editor from Random House approached her. She was 35 years old and asked her for her autobiography. And she tried to start writing her memoir. It took her 50 years. She's 86 now. It took her a long time. And one of the reasons it took her a long time is because a lot of the stories that she has, as is probably true with many, many people, could not be told publicly in midlife. She actually had to wait till her first husband was dead, which didn't happen until 2014. So she could publish an essay that describes spousal abuse. And she has this brutal chapter in here about the way that he beat her and threatened her with a pistol and so forth. She couldn't have published that in 1973. And that's the thing, is that her early life and her early professional life was marked by some horrific stuff. And it wasn't a simple matter to simply say, this is what happened, and now everybody read it. And anyway, we published it ourselves out of Book and Puppet Company. We made an audiobook of it first, with her reading it, and then we published it, and we won the National Association of Black Journalists Award, Outstanding Book Award. She won an award immediately. She's a very important figure in the history of journalism in this country. And she's been running programs at the bookstore on and off. And we had her at the store. She decided to do a public reading of Jack Smith's special counsel report about Trump's behavior during January 6th, 2021. And we read that on the day of Trump's second inauguration. So we ran a counter-inauguration event, a public reading of the Jack Smith report. And it was a few days later that we were running another event that she said to the group, she said, "Okay, everybody, you're all journalists. I want you to report to me right now about something that happened to you in the last week that only you know about." She challenged this group of about 25 people in my store, and everyone sort of froze. And I'm not sure why, actually. Nobody wanted to respond. What's something that happened to you in the last week, this was the week after the Trump inauguration, that only you know about? Report. And so, in the face of this silence, I, the bookstore owner, was standing at the back of the room, and I saw that nobody was talking. And I said, "Okay, I'll answer." And I told the story of how 2 weeks before I had been on a Zoom call. This is the first chapter in my book. I had been on a Zoom call with other booksellers, running a workshop, participating in a workshop about planning our marketing for the year. And one of the other booksellers who was on the Zoom call, somebody I hadn't seen for a while, I had read that she had closed a bookstore, one of her bookstores, unexpectedly. And so during a break in the Zoom call, I had said to her, I was so sorry to see that what happened, that you had to close your store. And she responded, "Didn't you hear what happened?" And I said, "No, I don't. I thought it was business. We didn't have enough business." And she said, "People were bringing lists to the school district about books they didn't want us to bring in our book fairs. And they were telling the school district that they had to stop working with us because of the books that we were selling. And the school district canceled all our book fairs." So she actually was stopped from doing about half of her business because these, I don't know whether it was a Moms for Liberty group, but it was a group like that came and started lobbying the schools against her inventory selection. And then the next day, I was back on the Zoom call, and she wasn't there. And I said to the other booksellers who were there, I said, "Geez, I didn't know she closed her store because of this, these book banners." And another guy said, "Well, she didn't tell you the whole story. There were guys with AR-15 rifles in front of her store." She was really targeted, and that happened. So I told the story right
This
there.
is something from the
The 25
1960s
people.
or
This happened.
the
This
1930s.
is a few months ago in eastern Pennsylvania, and Melba, who was standing at the front, said, "Andy, does anybody know this story?" And I said, "No, she didn't. This wasn't part of her press release. She didn't tell publicly why she closed her store." And Melba said, "Well, you got to tell the story. This is the journalist's job, because it is often true that somebody who is the subject right in the center of a story like this doesn't want it public. They don't want to go public. So the journalist has to go in and do it." And so that's really the genesis of this book, was this challenge to figure out how to tell this kind of a story. But the other thing which I talk about at the beginning of this book is that I really have found that people have been asking me about book banning. Again, I run a children's bookstore. I've been running children's bookstores for years. People come into my store and say, "So you sell children's books. What's all this book banning?" People are doing that now. And so I wanted to be able to hand them a book and say, "Look, I explain it. I'll explain it to you." And the simplest explanation, let me just explain, why is there so much book banning right now? Is because for 40 years, people like me and like Sandy and like Vern and people in the world of books have been striving to make children's books as a field, a more inclusive field. We wanted to have more books that represented children's experiences, real experiences in the real world that we live in, and not just this, what we had 50 years ago. It was all, white people in middle class circumstances, and that was all of children's literature. And
Or fairy tales.
And or fairy tales. We have succeeded. There is now, if you look at Word Up's bookcases, there is now this amazing new literature which has been produced in the last couple of decades under pressure from teachers, librarians, parents, booksellers, begging the publishers, let the voices of all the possible people in this country come forth from in the world of children's books. Let's have children's books that really represent this country. And we have succeeded, and there are thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of books that have been published, and that's what's being attacked. So my message is an optimistic message in this book, which is that there are so many book bans because we succeeded. They tried to stop us every year, all along the way, as more and more books were published. They put those books on their lists, but we just published more. And the lesson of my book is more speech. We do not advance as a society by restraining speech. We advance by speaking more. And so I'm a big advocate of people writing and publishing and running book festivals and opening bookstores and distributing zines and creating websites and creating movies and creating comics and get the voices flowing. And when people say, ban that, stop talking, don't let that push past them, defeat them or work around them or make the books available in a different way. But that's our obligation, is to continue doing what we've been doing so well.
Are there any questions for Mr. Lates?
You brought up Little Black Sambo, which I think is such an interesting point, because of course I agree that we should not be banning books. And then I think about that, and I think about, we were recently in Myrtle Beach where they have this crazy Trump section, which okay, you can't ban it, but what they also had was Behold the Pale Horse. And I was like, what is this book doing on the shelves in 2025 in Barnes & Noble? And I felt that impulse from myself of this shouldn't be here. Mm-hmm. And how do you think we in the left should deal with that kind of impulse?
Well, first of all, I do, as I just said, I do believe in more speech. I do think that in the case of Little Black Sambo, one of the arguments for including Little Black Sambo in so many school curricula and so many libraries is because there were no books with a black character. That was the only book with a black character for so many years. And, it was insulting. It's insulting. The word Sambo it's a racial slur, which I think a lot of white people didn't know, didn't understand. But the fact that now we don't need that book as the only book that has a black character. If you look at it now, it's just not very good. It's just the pictures aren't very good, and the storyline isn't really very good, and so you can just say, well, and of course there's other versions of it. I tell the story about Jerry Pinkney and Julius Lester doing a version of it. So, removing it from the shelf becomes less a decision if it's just not so good. And I think that that's part of the answer is that if you can kind of again continue to sort of swamp the market with something that's better, that you may be able to diffuse it somewhat. That's part of the answer. I mean, the other thing I think is learn more. And I have learned so much about Little Black Sambo now. And I have a lot of theories about Little Black Sambo. I think that Little Black Sambo is actually based on a West African folktale, and that the character of Sambo originally was a Nancy character, that he was a trickster, and that the author substitutes this kind of insulting sort of American fool for an older trickster character. So I don't think that she actually developed that plot line herself. I think it's the only way it makes sense. But there's always more to learn. And I think that learning more about whatever you're seeing is helpful in terms of diffusing and also in terms of your feelings about the moment that you're in. And you see that you're in a bookstore that's like this, that has books that you find appalling. You consider the question of when was this bookstore founded? How long is it going to last? Is this a viable project? Who's shopping here? There's dynamism to the cultural marketplace and the intellectual marketplace, and it's constantly shifting. So I don't think that it's necessary to stay in a particular moment. I think it's possible to look at a longer view. And that's, again, the idea of more speech. Is what can be done about this? How did this happen? The question was, if the bookseller had told us about the book banning and the threats before she closed, how would we have? What would I have advised her? So, first of all, she had been very successful at creating that business in that place and time. She had accomplished something that I was unable to accomplish myself, not too far away from her. So I regarded her as being very talented, and I knew about her skills. I knew that she was skilled. In fact, I had done a book event at her store, and I have met her over the years, and I know about her background. So I would have been very hesitant to have advised her as someone who knew more than she did. And that's one of the things that I have learned about as a bookseller, is that independent bookstores especially do tend to adapt to their communities and emerge from their communities. And I believe, looking at what happened to her, I believe that one of the things that occurred was that the community that she had created her bookstore in had been shifting around her. And that change was something that she wasn't willing to adapt to. She had opened 15 years ago, and that particular community had been drifting rightward in a way that she was unwilling to go. She wasn't willing to go there. So her decision to close that store, I would say, it was an informed and a rational decision. That community lost its bookstore, and that was a tragedy for that community. But she had another bookstore that she had opened in a different area that was doing quite well. And so she made a strategic decision with her business, and I would have been very hesitant to say, oh, well, listen to what, to mansplain her, and let's say, oh, I know what you should do. No, you can't do that to another bookseller. And that's something that I think is really important about independent bookselling, is that we do need to respect each other's special knowledge about our very specific circumstances, because these bookstores are so unique. They're very, very unusual in ways that we don't even know. I mean, I may be friends with somebody, but I don't really know that level of information.
I like what you said about, sort of responding to the community. I think that's one of these things. We were up so strong for so long, but we were just a couple of months older, and we were still in the pop-up space. We had a big banner. We thought we were such hot shit. And said, bilingual books. And this little Russian woman walks up to me one day as I'm cleaning the window and says, "Where are your Russian books?" And I said, that's a good question. So we reached out to a seller that had, secret Russian. That's a lot of books. We didn't realize that because we were next to the Port Authority, there were a ton of Eastern European and Russian immigrants who were working in New Jersey or coming back to New Jersey, working in New York, but they would drift into our store and drift out, and we just thought nothing of it. And once we started carrying that stuff, it started getting picked up.
That's amazing. That's an amazing story.
Any more questions? Thank you all for coming. A big round of applause for Mr. Laties.
Thank you so much, Sandy, and thank you to Word Out. Thank you for having me on the stage.